Hey everybody, welcome to the pre-market stream that we open up to the public every single Wednesday. Thanks for joining us this morning. Going to give you guys a little bit of a breakdown on what's going to happen today. Once I'm done speaking here, this is Spartan, by the way. Beth's going to come on, give you a breakdown of the macro environment, any news events that happen over the course of the evening, go through any bigger picture items that make sense to be looking at, commodities, ETFs, big caps, etc. Once that's done, I'm going to come on. We're going to go through the names that are gapping up, gapping down. We'll talk about those names and news associated with those gap up, gap downs, and also go through the technicals on those individual tickers as well. We'll go through the SPY, the FANG, the VXX, and IWM QQQ if we do have time for those two as well. After that's done, South Beach will come on, give you a breakdown of the analyst calls for the day, anything he's looking at in that regard, as well as any individual name that he's looking at. And then we'll do a quick little recap before the open and we'll be ready to go. So without further ado, I'll go ahead, pass over to Beth, and I'll talk to you guys shortly. Beth, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my friends. Welcome. Wednesday morning here, pre-market at Spartan Trading. Hearty welcome to our YouTube streamers joining us today. A lot of big picture stuff to talk about, obviously, right? And I'll give you the narrative in terms of the broader picture, weekly, monthly. And I obviously will always defer to Spartan in terms of the technicals on the short-term basis. That's his thing. He's the best out there. So let's see what's going on. We don't have any data. That's one of the problems we got with market. There's nothing for the market to look at in terms of on the economic side. So left to its own devices, the market can get into some trouble. And that's exactly what seems to be happening. Overseas. Well, actually, let's talk about this build on the API crude stocks. We do have, obviously, the EIA numbers. Okay, when you hear me talking about this as a big deal, that means nothing's going on, right? UK inflation numbers, PPI numbers, retail price numbers. It's remarkable. A little bit PPI output, a little bit higher than expected, year over year, month over month. We want to see this, guys. We want to see some sort of inflation, but if you look here, year over year, incredibly tame. Globally, central banks are having a really hard time getting these inflation numbers up. Within the reflationary scenario, I actually think it's more stagflation, but well, actually more it is reflation because of the economic, the economy is starting to bounce, but it's hard. This is a nightmare for central banks. How do you juice up inflation? What's going to happen is it's not going to be now, but it's going to be slowly the narrative that we've been talking about in terms of supply chain disruption, in terms of the commodities. I'm not talking just about oil. I'm talking about, soybean. I'm talking about copper. I'm talking about all these different commodities that are going up that will impact longer term, not 6 months, probably 12 months, 24 months. What will be the tailwind for slow rise in inflation? Okay. Canadian inflation rates coming out today as well. You know me, we just got the CIA. We do have a bond auction, the 20-year. Okay. There we go from there. All right. So let's talk about supply chain. It's really important that we get a grasp on this. We know that there are, it's very, very difficult, especially in terms of the different ports, to clear through what's going on. A lot of it had to do with weather. A lot of it had to do with just this such a backlog, on the east, on the Pacific side, right? As well as on the Atlantic side. There's such a backlog in terms of getting these tankers through. And the reality is, and this is why, to be honest with you, the focus has to be on small businesses right now in terms of assisting them. They don't have the capacity to pass on the rise in cost because of the supply chain disruption, right? And I think this is going to be a theme that I'm going to be talking about quite a bit, okay? And as you can see that, 44% of small businesses report temporary shortages or the supply chain problems. This is a big deal, guys. All right. So we'll see how this plays out, but it's and obviously what happened with the Suez Canal too, crazy stuff. But I think there's going to be a need to assist small businesses going forward. That's where the focus should be. Right? Okay. Why is the stock market dropping today? That was actually yesterday, right? Well, COVID cases are rising. We know about that. Check, check. We know that the vaccine issue with J&J, that's resolving itself. I don't think this is a big deal anymore, guys, to be honest with you. I don't know what, confidence was eroding. The reality is fact, okay? Flu shots have more risk than this COVID vaccine has. You're talking about millions of people injected to J&J, 7 million, right? And you're talking about the potential for maybe a handful of individuals that fall into this category. I understand it's for those who are, who lost their life, whatever. But the reality is you probably could statistically get hit by a car more than you could die from the J&J vaccine. I know I'm very passionate about this. Well, you get the idea, okay? Reopening, weakening, it's interesting. I did see some cruise line sweeps. I want to go over what we saw towards the end of the day because I think it's kind of telling. We started to see on the option flows, longer dated options being placed on the call side. I'm talking about, September, stuff like that, October, which to me is the first time we've kind of seen that sort of longer term nibbling by institutions. I want to see what happens today. I want to see what the option flows look like. I want to see what's going to happen with Netflix, obviously. I still think Netflix has further to go. Look, the CEO basically said what he was going to say. Oh my God, no, there's no competition. They're not taking away our subscribers. Well, come on. I don't know how to value right now Netflix, but I don't think we're done because when we have this sort of an earnings surprise, normally it's a 90 to 100 point move down, okay, in the underlying, in Netflix. So just saying, okay? Economic recovery, we don't have any data, so we don't know what the hell's going on. That's what Kathy was up to. Okay, oh, Kathy, still buying that coin. Well, of course she would in that fund, right? But it's a fintech, right? That's what she's looking at as. And I agree with her on that. More JD. This is the only one that I've seen in terms of, and PDD, she's starting to nibble on. Okay, so JD and PDD, those are the two basically on the Chinese side that are interesting to me. But really some new names here that I haven't seen before. I mean, not in a while at least. So we'll see how things play out. She's doing a little bit of selling here, a little bit of buying there, yada, yada, yada. But consistently, JD, we're seeing her not. She loves this Unity software as well. It's a very small position. And NVIDIA, she's pruning a little bit. Space, she's pruning a little bit, right? And this ACIC. Okay, all right. Tip breaks. What's going on? This Crew Energy, as you can see, guys, the Canadian entities are very, very, very active in terms of on the commodity side, basically buying and selling. All right, so we got the Q Energy, we got that, we've got this Canacol Energy. All right, so it's interesting, right? Let's take a peek here. What's going on here? Let's look at the S&P 500. No change, still Viacom, still IOM. All right, let's take a look at the Dow. What's going on there? Stronger than the S&P, as you can see on the smart score. Nike. Okay, hold on a second. Apologize. My puppy, she's getting a little rambunctious. Nike here, American Express, right? And let's take a look at the NASDAQ, Baidu. It's interesting, right? Baidu, and then XPL. We're going to go through the, on the future side, a couple things in terms of the indices, but I want to do a deep dive in some of the top alphabet soups that I like to look at, XLK, XLY, XLP, and XLV, as well as XBI. All right, let's do it. Smart money, dumb money. Smart money's already down to 17, so the smart money is saying, I'm out of here. Dumb money says, I'm not out of here yet. So we saw this divergence, right? And I mentioned it yesterday. So basically, as the market was going up, we were making lower highs. That's not a good thing you want to see. All right, let's take a look here. Okay, yes, I understand this concept. If you look at the VIX, forward PE multiple, I understand this. Going back to 1990, I understand this concept, okay? We know, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, look at it here in this swatch, right? I mean, look at it here. So, yeah, I know that people say no volatility, no volatility, no volatility. Okay, so let's look at it. After the PE multiple VIX spread, 10-day average is greater than 6.5. What does it mean? Not a whole hell of a lot. Okay, 3 months out, this is notable because it's 80%, 2% down. This is 60%. I can't statistically, this isn't enough for me to even think about it, right? For me, I like 80+%. We know 2 weeks out, it's up, yada, yada, yada. So this is the big deal right here, okay? This is after the S&P 500 PE multiple, after the PE VIX spread is 10-day average is greater than 5. So this is different, okay? You can see here, 100%, 2 months out, down 4.5%. Right? This is a PE of the S&P 500. So this is telling us 2 months, 3 months out, there could be some rocky times going, okay? Even 6 months out, this is 80%. You can see here, this is the one that garnered my attention, this spread, okay? All right, one more, VIX, bullish on the VIX, okay? So when this happens, the VIX goes up. And we've been talking about this. I mean, we've been saying, I've been saying, got a red flag divergence going on. Basically, the VIX is not going to the low end of the range. And that's not a bad thing, to be honest with you. But this is telling us, yes, we're going to have volatility spiking. And yes, we should have basically a pullback in the market. And this is the PE multiple, right? That's how you look at it. Okay, let's take a look here, what we got going on. Rank charts, MJ basically. This is, to me, is a buying opportunity when it gets down to single digits, right? So we have oil and gas, crude oil services. Sorry about that, guys. I got a puppy. What can I tell you? This is what puppies do. Utilities, real estate. So we know that we were seeing dividend rotation into dividend stocks, right? So that would be utilities, healthcare. So these are the top dogs, rotation, REITs, okay? All right. And then if we look here in terms of sectors, financial, money flows out of industrials, yada, 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 coming into energy, right? Oversold, overbought, energy, Russell, and then you can see here the utilities are overbought, basic materials, consumer staples, healthcare. Okay. So country-wise, Peru, a lot of this is a function of the virus, right? India, it is, and I am in those INDA puts, okay? And I just don't see how this stops anytime soon, okay? It's a big deal for India, guys, right? Just so you know. And we're starting to see more pop up in Japan. Canada's having some issues. So this is a reflection of what's going on with the virus right now, right? On the top side, Vietnam, Taiwan, yeah, look at the list, okay? And if you look here, we're kind of below the mid. So this is a tailwind for us. And you know, I love it when we get to this color because that's a tailwind for us. We still have some, this XLU rotation. It's going to be a function of whether we're going to get rotate out of the dividend play that we saw, right? And into a little bit more higher beta growth. I personally think that with what happened with some of these earnings, especially Netflix, guys, I think we're going to see, once again, money rotating into the small caps. So I now believe that in terms of the Russell, the pullback and stuff like that, we basically are reaching levels that make sense for us to put back on TNA. And for those members, I will post that once I start to see what I want to do with that. So that would be long, leverage long the Russell. Okay, here you see this is the green. This is what we like. SMH, not yet. I want to see the single digits, actually, to be honest with you. Okay, so let's take a look at the heat map. XLK, yeah. XLY was top dog on the down. Well, no, actually, XLF was the top dog on the downside. Oh, XLE, sorry about that. So you can see here what it looks like. It was clear that money was going into dividends, right? Healthcare, XLP, XLRE, XLU. Okay, so we saw that. Kansas Southern was obviously another bid on it, right? Up 15%, who knew? But I want to go over the healthcare versus the bio sector. We're going to go through that very quickly. Flow, what's going on here? So towards the end of the day, we started to see some money flowing in. I want to bring to your attention a couple prints that got me going, okay? This is the first time we've seen MU going farther out. So this was the July. Okay, and there was a lot that went through 90s, 85s, right? Some of this was in the money, some of this a little bit out of the money, but this is notable. This is something we want to look at, all right? And we want to make sure that with some of these things, I want to see today the same thing that happened at the end of yesterday. Okay, so you saw the micron, right? It's going to be important for this market to see follow through. This GM caught my attention, but once again, only 1 month out. So until I start to see institutional buying, okay, farther out, we still have a sloppy, choppy shit show going on. Finally, we saw some put sweeps coming in of size on the S&P. This is, to be honest with you, this is nothing, right? Nothing, just nothing. Qs, nothing, right? So I still think this is just a necessary pullback and a melt up. I don't know how much more we have to go on the downside. All right, let's look at the AAII. What are they talking about here? 53.8% are bullish, still neutral. So it's almost 50-50 if you look at neutral bearish, okay, against the bullish side. Okay, and this has been pretty consistent. This was a little bit more bearish, but you can see, and this is the historical average, right? Equal, kind of cool, right? All right, let's take a look at the 10-year. All right, so where are we? We are basically sitting still on this weekly uptrend line, right? I've been talking about this narrative, nail this top. I think now we go back to this bottom, okay, and we see how things play out. And that, you know, this bottom actually is the fib, 23.6%. Okay, and that's okay. It's okay. I still think we're in a sideways consolidated range. All right, let's take a look globally. All right. A little bit sloppy choppy here. As you can see, a little bit of slight yield increase on the 5, 10, 30, like minuscule, as you can see, and a little bit on the downside here in terms of yield on the 2. Let's go overseas. Excuse me. Germany, France, Spain, Italy, yield down. Okay, this is a big deal. This French, anybody who plays this, guys, God bless. This thing is crazy. I mean, we're talking, you know, constantly double digits, you know, to, as you can see here, triple digits move on this thing. This is crazy. All right, and then you can see in the UK that rates are slightly up. Japan slightly up, Hong Kong slightly, well, not slightly, but down, and then Australia. All right, let's take a look at the VIX. This is the red flag I've been talking about, right? All-time highs, yada, 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 and we should be down here. So the VIX never lies. I'm just saying, the VIX never lies. I'm not talking about VXX is meant to go to 0. It's doing its reverse split. The VIX never lies, all right? This is a big, huge red flag, and that's what we're seeing right now, right? Dollar, double dollar. It actually bounced off this uptrend line, guys, so let's keep an eye on this. Whether we start to, this is a monthly, whether we start to push up again, that's going to be important for us. FANG, lower high, negative, right? All right, so we didn't break through that. We basically are at last week's low. We did pull all the way back to this fib, all right? All in all, the damage is not extensive, but it's a red flag because FANG did not break the downtrend line in this consolidated pattern, okay, to the upside. So we're still mired in muck, is what I'm going to tell you. All right, futures, ES, potential double top, okay. You know, this is the hard part with a lot of these charts is that I don't look at the day-to-day. Spartan does that, but I look at the overall. Yes, we are incredibly extended, no question about that, right? And let's assume that we basically do have a top in on the futures side, okay? What kind of pullback can we look for in the futures? Let's say we get back to the 23.6% fib, okay? That would be 5.5%. If we look at where we are right now, you're looking at potentially another 3.86%. I do not think we break here below this. We could be in this range for some time. That's okay. But on a risk reward basis, yes, the risk is slightly to the downside, but we're talking about 3.86%, I think, potentially. Right, and that's it. All right, let's take a look at that. This is the one that's a conundrum because it basically, on the monthly, this is a monthly, it's still holding above this uptrend line, so that's bullish. Okay, it's below this pivot right here, that's bearish. And we do have some room on the downside. There's no question about it, okay? And that potential on the downside, minimally right now, could be right down to here, okay? So that's right about there. Same narrative, right? Potentially another 5% down, okay? Overall price move would be 7.35% from the high. If it extends, and it probably will extend, okay, the NASDAQ could get down to 12.83%. Okay, I told everybody in the room multiple times that I was hedging. I didn't like what I was seeing. Okay, those hedges protected me fantastically, especially with these longer dated swings. Okay, I'm up 2023. There's no reason for me to get out of it. With this price action guide, there's no reason for me to get on my long-term swing, but there was enough of a reason for me to hedge. Okay, Russell, monthly, holding this uptrend line since March 2020, okay? We break this, it has my full attention, okay? Basically, if we take out the low from yesterday, all right, it has my attention, okay? Because then it can move another, as you can see here, move down to here. All right. A2, 5%. All right, Dow, same narrative. Dow actually looks the best of all of these, like to FYI. Here's XLY, XLK, okay? What do we got going on here? Monthly, holding up fine. This is the pivot right now, 139.24, okay? XLK SPY, sideways consolidation, so it's equal. So if you want to use the XLK as a hedge, you can. If the SPY starts to break down, that's fine, all right? That's what that means. All right, XLY. This is a little bit dicey because we basically broke this uptrend line that goes back to 2018. We have fallen below it. 174.39 is a pivot. This is the month that it should be doing well. Right? Has my full attention as well. 174.39. SPY against the XLY. Sideways consolidation, as you can see. No real trade right there. Tesla against XLY. Tesla's slowly grinding higher. If it breaks this uptrend line, has my full attention, and yes, I will buy some puts. Okay. All right, Amazon XLY, flagging, but as you can see here, triple top, has my attention as well. Fell below this weekly extension, all right? So we'll see how this plays out. First things first, last week's low is what we want to look at. So that's 1878. XLP, XLY, consumer staples against consumer discretionary, sideways consolidation, okay? I would think the XLP would start to basically go grind higher if we are indeed going to have a pullback in this market. We will continue to see, because of a dividend trade, whatever, XLP, and this is my catch-up trade anyways, should start out to perform. Amazon, Tesla, let's take a peek here. Sideways consolidation, interesting. This is going to coil, guys. I have literally no idea what's going to happen with it, but it's monthly. It has my full attention. XLV, this is the strongest right now of the ETFs, right at its all-time highs, right? Continues to grind higher, but as you can see here on the monthly, is at two extensions, going back here to 2018, as well as this going back to 2018. So there's two extensions here. Interesting. XBI, not the same picture, right? As you can see, all right? So XBI is starting to break down. It is holding this extension. This extension goes back to 2018 as well. Notable. Keep an eye on that. All right. I would actually like to see the biotech ETF start to move higher. If it does not, then I'm going to be buying some XBI because of the monthly breakdown. Okay. All right. My time is up. Once again, welcome to those of you who are joining us on our live YouTube stream, as well as our new members for our pre-market. It's time for me to pass on to Spartan. Are you ready, sir?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, guys, morning. What's going on? If you guys are new to the Discord, you were emailed that Discord link, so be sure to check that. It should be in your either main inbox or your junk mail. Just look through both. You'll see it. All righty, let's take a look at what we got going on this morning, guys. A couple different things. Pre-market tickers on watch: ISRG, Netflix, Roku, AMAT, Fucho, and Riot. ISRG earnings beat EPS and revs, year-over-year growth 17.5%. Stocks gapping up nicely on that. Netflix earnings beat EPS and revs, year-over-year growth 24.2%. Q2 guidance EPS raised, rev lowered. And the main thing, large miss on subscriber numbers. Stocks gapping down on that. Roku trading lower in sympathy with Netflix. AMAT, ICAP increases applied materials. AMAT price target to 160. Never heard of these guys before, but that is why they are gapping up today. Fucho gapping down in continuation from last day's move. So we got a lot of range there. We'll take a look at that. And as well as Riot gapping down amid the decline in the Bitcoin price. Let's take a look at these names from a technical standpoint intraday. So first two names you're going to be looking at today: ISRG, Netflix. So let's take a look at what we got here. So ISRG, big gap up. Usually trades a little bit thinner, but after earnings has some range, so it's not a bad thing to play. Get rid of the mid. There we go. All right, that should work. Perfect. All right, so a couple fib extension levels here. Just gonna get one more support. All right, so the 839.79 level is the pivot to the upside today. What's the pivot point? Just a major support or resistance level on the daily. Between other support and resistance levels, that pivots the price action. So in this case, that level is 839.79. This level is able to hold. We got room towards 850.06 to 858.46 on the upside. Unable to hold, we look for a pullback towards 825.35 to 812.50 on the downside. Overall, in ISRG, going to be leaning on the bullish neutral side today. We'll see if we can hold the pivot, grind higher. Typically gets some follow through after earnings, so we'll see if that can occur today. Let's take a look at Netflix. So I got to go a little bit lower in terms of the supports. Okay. All righty. So Netflix obviously pulling back after earnings. Pivot to the downside today is going to be this 499.12 area. This level is able to hold. We do have room to bounce back towards 507.51 to 515.78. Get above that. 521.85 can be tested. Unable to hold. We look for a pullback towards 493.05 to the 485.88 support. That level breaks. We can see 478.95 tested on the downside. Overall, going to be leading on the bearish neutral side today, looking for a continuation pull lower. I do think we'll see some base and kick in intraday, but for now, looking for it to roll over a little bit back towards the earnings lows. So that's ISRG, that is Netflix. Let's take a look at the next two. Screenshot those. Roku and AMAT. Let's take a look at Roku here. So obviously EMA support break on the daily, rejected at the 50 MA. Pulling back here. Okay. $330, $320. That's what I'm looking at. 324.16. Right, so this is quite a bit of room lower. 339.60 pivot to the downside today on Roku. Levels unable to hold. Room towards 331.93. If that level breaks, we see 324.16 tested on the downside. Able to hold, look for pull or push back to 348.33 to 352.93 on the upside. Overall on Roku, going to be leaning on the bearish side today, looking for continuation lower. So that is Roku. Let's take a look at AMAT. Okay, definitely going to mark last day's low. So definitely looks heavy on the daily still, despite the little gap up today. I forgot. I don't know sure if I said which way I was leaning on Roku, by the way, but bearish neutral. Looking for continuation lower. All right, so AMAT, what's that level? It's 124.57. Okay. So AMAT pivot to the downside today, 129.31. Levels unable to hold. You got room towards 128.15. That level breaks 124. 124.57 will be tested. Able to hold up, look for a pushback towards 131.30 to the 132.69 level on the upside. Overall on AMAT going to be leaning on the bearish neutral side today, looking for continuation lower if that pivot's unable to hold. To me, it looks like the EMA resistance to the upside is still intact on the daily, so I think we can continue to roll over towards that 50 EMA. But of course, that's if the pivot's broken and is unable to be reclaimed or held. So that's Roku. That is AMAT. Let's take a look at the next two, which are Fucho and Riot. So Future had that break of the 50 MA yesterday. Came back to reclaim. Right now we are below it, which I'm going to label right here, 136.58. That's the pivot to the upside today. This level is unable to hold. We do have room for continuation down towards the 128.22 spot. If that level breaks, we have further room into the 118s, or sorry, 117.09. It's got about 11 points of room to the downside if we break that 128. Reclaim 136.58. We do have room to bounce back into the 141.71 to 146.85 resistance on the upside. Overall, on Future, going to be leading on the bearish side today, looking for continuation lower. Don't think it's done yet to the downside. So that's what I'll be looking for. Continuation lower if that pivot stays intact. So that's Future. Let's take a look at Riot. So Riot slight gap down as well. Is that 40.46? I don't know what that is. Oops. This makes more sense. Riot pivots to the upside today, 38.91. Levels able to hold. We do have room for continuation towards 41.88 to the 43.75 spot. Unable to hold, we look for a pullback to 34.68 to the 37.46 level on the downside. Overall on Riot, going to be leaning on the bearish side today, looking for continuation lower. So that's Future. That is Riot. Alrighty, so let's take a look at the SPY and the FANG here, guys. See what's going on in the market perspective, as well as I think we will have time for the IWM and Qs. So that's good. So market pulling back into the longer term EMA support on the daily. We did break shorter term EMA support, short term trend to the upside. Notable things. And I think we may come back if this EMA support's unable to reclaim or hold today in the short term towards this top channel break. It's quite a bit low, quite a bit lower. 403s, 404s. And that's if that 409.86 level breaks. I think that's going to be the key. So let's take a look at where we got room to today. I'm actually going to do something here. Give us more room to the bottom side. There we go. Pivot to the downside today, 411.69. Level breaks, 410.13 to 409.23 will be tested on the downside. Able to hold the pivot. Look for a pushback to 412.63 to 413.53 on the upside. Overall, going to be leaning on the bearish neutral side of the gate. I do think we need to pull back into that 409.83 spot, and then we can see what happens. I'm just going to quickly do this as well. Because we should be aware of the channel that the SPY has been trading within in the short term. You can see it's clear. We did break it a couple of times yesterday and then reclaimed. And right now this morning, we're probably going to see a retest of the bottom end of it and then a bounce. But we'll see what happens. So that is the SPY. Let's take a look at Apple. $132.67. Pivot to the downside today. This level is unable to hold. They got room towards 130.96 to 129.70. Able to hold 134.47 to 135.82. Will be retested on the upside. Looks like Apple wants to pull back to short-term EMA support as well. So leaning bullish neutral on the name. Looking for a slight pullback towards that 130.96 spot. And then we'll see what happens if that support can hold. Big uptrend level on the daily. All right, let's take a look at Amazon. Looks like Netflix getting a little bit of a bounce here this morning. $33.16. 310.61. Okay. All right, so biggest thing or biggest level today, pivot wise, it's going to be this 33.10.61. This level is able to hold. We do have room for continuation back towards the 33.20s, which should be taken out quickly, then into the 33. I'm not just going to delete this, whatever. Back into the 33.41 to 33.62. Unable to hold. Look for a pullback to 32.89 on the downside. Overall on Amazon, I'm actually going to be leaning on the bullish neutral side. I want to see it bounce off of that EMA support on the daily, if that pivot can stay intact. So leaning bullish neutral. If the pivot can hold, I think we get a bounce. All right, let's take a look at Facebook because we've already done Netflix. And then we'll do Google. So Facebook, some surprising strength. Yesterday, after Apple announced or talked about the privacy. 33.63, okay. So we have a short-term pivot here. Delete that actually. So pivot will be 299.81. If this level is able to hold, we do have room for continuation of 303.63. Unable to hold, 297.22 will be tested on the downside. Overall on Facebook, going to be leaning on the bullish neutral side today, looking for a push back towards that 303.63 level. See if we can reclaim it. If we do, we can get a little bit more of a push back to the upside. I think this has done a pretty good job of holding up on the daily. Showed some strength yesterday on a reversal. We'll see if it's able to hold up today. Pivot, again, going to be the key level to be watching. All right, let's take a look at Google. So Google, testing the bottom of that range it's been trading within. Okay. Move this. All right, pivot to the upside today, 220, 22.72. This level is able to hold. We got room on the upside for continuation into the 22.80.91 spot to 22.95. Unable to hold, 22.63.48 to 22.48 will be tested on the downside. Going to be leaning on the bearish neutral side today, looking for continuation lower. Looks like it wants to pull back into this range here. 22.48. So that's what I'll be looking for if the pivot's unable to hold out the gate this morning. So that is Google. All right, let's take a look at VXX. So as you guys know, we got the split on Friday. 1044 pivot, levels able to hold. 1059 to 1090 will be tested. Unable to hold, 1021 to 1007 on the downside will be tested. Keep an eye on that pivot point today at 1044. As long as the VXX holds up, or VIX, if you want to look at that, we should see some selling pressure in the market. All right, let's take a look at the QQQs. Let's take a look at IWM. Okay. So EMA support test on the daily, which is going to be the big level, and the pivot, which is that 33.92 spot. I don't know if you guys can see it. Move it. This level is able to hold. We got room to back towards 335.45 to 337.92. Unable to hold, we look for a pullback to 331.44 on the downside. Overall on Qs, going to be leaning on the bearish side today. Looking for a continuation lower into that pivot point, bearish neutral, and then we'll see if that level can hold. If it can, market can bounce, or the Qs can bounce. Unable to do so, we should see continuation sell off to the downside. So it's big levels being tested today, guys. Short-term EMA support. It's going to dictate where we go in the short term. All right, IWM, we did break the 50 EMA yesterday. Looks like we pushed back to kind of retest it this morning. That's the longer term trend. That can go. Okay. So pivot to the downside today, 217.49. Levels able to be reclaimed, room towards 219.36 to 220.98. Unable to hold, 214.85 to 213.06. Will be tested on the downside. Going to be leaning on the bearish neutral side if the pivot can't be reclaimed this morning. If it can, then obviously we can get a bounce, and IWM will push back to retest the 50 EMA on the daily, which is around that 219.58 spot. So first resistance level will be a retest of that 50 EMA. So there'll be a big resistance to get back through. We'll see what happens there. Should be quite interesting. Quickly, I just want to take a look at XLK. Just to see where that big support is, which is the 140 level. So that's a key level to be watching too on the XLK. 140, that level breaks. We see continuation lower. We talked about SMH yesterday as well and how this broke the 50 MA. And we'll see if it can bounce, or sorry, tested the 50 MA yesterday. 241.20. We'll see if it can bounce today. If it does, then we should see a little bit of a bounce in semiconductors, which I think will help tech. And then I think we can get an actual bounce off of EMA supports. But, you know, again, we'll see what happens. Anyways, so that's the SPY. That's the FANG. Those are the individual names that we're looking at today, guys. I'm going to go pass over to Salt Beach while I type up the pre-market action plan. When I come back on, we'll go through that. I'll show you it for the guys on the stream, the YouTube stream this morning. And we'll go from there. Salt Beach, if you're ready, it's all yours. I will give it a second for him to come on, guys. I'm just slightly a little bit early. But when he's ready, he'll pop on. Until then, I'll just post everything.
Spartan, you want me to talk a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about Apple and Amazon. Okay, because we're still okay, and I know I get this question a lot about it. It's a massive multi-month consolidated pattern going all the way back to July. Okay, of last year. We're at the top end of the range. We have a double top in place on the weekly, sadly, sad to say. It's flagging. I still think just.
I'm sorry, just wait.
Right.
Sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. My alarm didn't go off, I apologize. Anyway, let's see what we got. Okay, bond market, 10 years unchanged, pretty much, 156. This is no competition for equities, okay? The 10-year in London, no change. Germany, no change. No change, okay? No volatility, no change. Let's look at commodities. Oil's down $1.30. It was down yesterday, okay? So let's see what's going on with that. That may be the pandemic raising its ugly head. Who knows? Let's look at currencies mixed against Europe. In Asia, we're flat, pretty flat. Currencies are pretty flat, and euros at 120. Okay, so really nothing in the currency market, nothing in the bond market. Let's look at crypto. Okay, so that's down another 2% on Bitcoin. I did say that I thought that with that Coinbase IPO, you had a really good chance of a kind of little bit of a shakeout, an inflection point. That's what we're getting. Do I think it's done on the upside? No. Do I think we're having a bit of a correction? Yes. Okay, so that's what's going on with crypto. And let's look at the foreign markets. Okay, FTSE is unchanged. DAX is down 40 points, which is less than, it's 0.27%, so very, very quiet. Nikkei is down 2%. Supposedly, I read that the pandemic is, the virus is spreading a little bit in Asia more than they would like, and that's what's causing the weakness there. Hong Kong was down 1.7%, and China, nothing doing there. Okay, so that's the foreign markets. Okay, quiet out of China overnight. Oil we discussed, the virus. I think things are going pretty well in the US. I mean, there's certain places that are hot. Where I am, you wouldn't know there was a virus to begin with. And let's look at Mr. Market from yesterday. Okay, we did have what we saw. We had volatility enter the market yesterday, which is, you know, something that I've been waiting for and happy about. And so I think we get more volatility. We see the markets, you know, the S&P is fluctuating here. So if we get volatility, trading's going to get a lot better quickly. And that's what I'm keeping my fingers crossed about. Okay, so what did we have yesterday? What was good? Very little. We had the consumer non-durables was strong, and we had big pharma was strong. Okay, and HMOs was strong. Pretty much that's it. Okay, what was weak? Okay, you had the airlines were weak, retail was weak, cyclicals, the Chinese stocks, big oil, NDNP were weak, high PE tech was weak, semiconductors were weak, solar, EV, insurance, Bitcoin was weak, cruise lines were weak. All right, so hotels were weak. So basically, we had, you know, weakness across the board except for those two groups. Those two groups have in common, and utilities were strong as well. So they have, you know, these larger dividends, they have yield attraction, and that's what kept them up. So a flight to safety. And that's what we had yesterday, okay? What's going to be today? We'll see. I'll try to make a prediction in a few minutes, but let's see what we got, what else we have today. All right. Okay. So on earnings, we had Ericsson had good earnings. We've talked about this a little bit. A lot of analysts were, you know, pounding the table that this is a, you know, a good 5G play. And so that had good earnings. Other than that, the big thing was Netflix. I mean, you know, listen, they had everything going in their favor, right? And people were, you know, turning on Netflix like crazy. You got to expect a slowdown. It was more than expectations. But once you watch streaming TV, it's really hard to go back to, I think, the regular TV, unless you're watching sports and you have no choice. Okay, with the commercials and all, you want to blow your brains out. So I think they'll be fine. The research on Netflix today is fairly bullish, and we'll see what's with that. Tonight you have on the earnings front, you have DFS and Lamb Research. You have Las Vegas Sands, and but tomorrow I think you really get into earnings season, okay? And you're really going to get a flavor for what this earnings season's going to be about, because there's a lot of different stocks from different groups all reporting. And I think tomorrow's like really for me, the official beginning of earnings season. You have a bunch of airlines. You have American and Alaska. You have Cleveland Cliffs and FCX, two commodity stocks. You have Tractor Supply. You have TRN, SAP, which is a tech. You got GPC, HCA. You got Southwest Air. You got Union Pacific. So you have stocks from all walks of life. DHI, you have a home builder. You have Danaher, which is a super a cyclical, Dow Chemical as well. So you're really seeing the whole gamut tomorrow, and we'll really get a flavor for what, for me anyway, if the earnings season is going to be good, bad, or indifferent. So I'm looking forward to that. What else do we have? Let's run through the research quickly. All right, there's so much I could talk about today. I really could talk about forever, but let's just stick to the what we got here. Zebra, that was downgraded to sell by Morgan Stanley. I kind of look, the guy's been dead wrong. Okay. He's had a 380 target. The stock is 490 or whatever, and he's been dead wrong. But there is a little meat on the bone here. Okay. So they downgraded to sell. They raised the target to 410. And he's saying the USPS deal, US Postal Service, will cause a drop in earnings. Okay. That's his argument. He doesn't like that deal. Look, the guy's been wrong, so you gotta, paint it with a, you really have to look at this, because when analysts are wrong, they usually stay wrong. So, but I do like when they have some kind of substance behind what they're saying. AutoZone sell on price is coming out of Bank of America. I don't like that. Here's another one with a little meat on the bone. Rocket Mortgage, they downgrade this. This is Bank America to neutral from a buy, but they're saying that higher rates are going to cause fewer mortgages. That kind of sort of makes sense. And they lower the price target from 27 to 24. My only thought is, even if rates go, let's say, to 2% or 2.5%, those are historically really low rates, and so I don't really think that's going to change what people do, but this is the argument that Bank of America is making. Here's another one that I thought was interesting coming out of Citibank. They downgraded Procter, but they're basically saying commodity inflation will cause margin erosion. And I kind of agree with that call. You see, if you look at the material stocks, you see that there is pretty much commodity inflation. So that's I think an interesting call as well. So what else was there on the short side? This Coop was downgraded. The stock's been a monster. Cooperman was bullish on that, and that's that. So that's the short side. Let's look at the long side. First of all, Goldman took a look at the cruise lines, and their least favorite is the one I don't like, which is Carnival. Okay, but I was out with my buddy who's a big, he does a lot of the bookings for the cruise lines. I think he's got like a 10% market share. And he was saying that Carnival is well positioned because they have like 80% of their ships sailing outside the US. So that was his argument. I just don't like the balance sheet. But he did say that with the all the money they raised, that these guys are going to have trouble bringing the money to the bottom line, which I agree with. But anyway, the Carnival's the least favorite. They have a neutral. They have a neutral on Royal Caribbean, but they did raise the target to 95 and the stock's 81. So I don't really think that's a neutral. I think that's like an outperform. And they raised Norwegian to a buy from neutral. They raised the target to 37. This is my favorite. Okay, this has the best management. It has the best balance sheet. And they're growing capacity coming into this year faster than anybody else, and that should be a bullish thing if this pandemic goes away. So Norwegian was their favorite. I 100% agree with that. Here's a call. I don't know this stock, ARVN, and I was trying to find out about it as a biotech. Truist, who doesn't do a lot of crazy targets. So I gave it I'm giving it a second look. They initiate with a buy, target 150, stock 67. You don't see that out of these guys. If anybody knows the stock, you can write it in the chat what you think. I just don't know it well enough to give a good opinion other than this is out of character for Truist to have such a bull case in the name. What else was that interesting? Netflix, I didn't see anything interesting. Most guys are sticking with it. Raymond James likes the Sky West, which is an airline. That seems to be their favorite. They have a strong buy and they raised the target to 56, stock's 48. I love their airline analyst is pretty good. Crisp, Opco likes this one. I'm sorry, Barclays likes this one. Raised the target to 160. You know what? These stocks, let's face it, the CRISPR stocks, the EDIT, the NVTA, and the CRISP, they act like crap. Look at these charts. I mean, for me, I don't like the bottom fish. It's a bad policy, and it's really tough. And those of you who have tried to buy Viacom on the dip here know what I'm talking about. It's just really hard to buy a bottom. It's just super difficult. Penn Gaming, who was bullish on this? Let's see. So much research that melds into each other. Goldman. So they raised the target to 158 in Penn Gaming. Stock's 89. Stock's been weak of late, like a lot of things. And it looks like it's broken to me, but you guys can be your own judge. On my charts, it's broken. What else? Amazon, Opco raises a target to 4,200. Okay, stock's 3,300. That's pretty bullish. CSX, you got a couple of guys raising numbers. As I talked about yesterday, these rails, there's only really 4 of them and soon to be 3. And so they're special, but you got to say to yourself, okay, we know they're special, but what's the catalyst to get the ones that aren't taken over higher? And I just don't know what that is. So even though I like the names, I don't know if there's a catalyst to make money. And a bunch of you guys are trading Pepsi. UBS raised the target from 145 to 165 on that one. That's basically it. Which ones are my favorite? I like the Sky West call. I think this Arvin is worth a good look. Pepsi on the short side, maybe look at this Rocket Mortgage. I think a lot of guys are stuck in it, and maybe Procter. That's really it. Okay, so that's that. On the IPO market, we have a bunch of IPOs coming today, and they're priced like these are pretty good companies, guys. So let's start with the first one. First one is Dog Victor, DV. Okay. Goldman deal, 13 million, coming right at the top of the range. And they do software for digital advertising, for analysis of digital advertising. This one sounds pretty decent. It's a Goldman deal. It's probably pretty hot. Now, these stocks have not done, IPOs have not done what they were doing in the past, where they come at 20 and open at 60. So let's see where this one opens. It seems to be a pretty decent company. Morgan Stanley, same kind of thing. 23 million at 56. The range was 52.54. That stock is PATH, Path. Okay, this is pretty decent as well. Software for robotics, process automation. Sounds like a interesting area to be in. I like software, you know that. So that one's interesting. And the last one's out of Jefferies. Jefferies deals generally aren't as good as the Morgan and Goldman, but this one also was priced at the top of the range. Skywater Tech, engineering efficiency for foundries and fabrication services. Okay, well, you know that area is hot, right? From the semi shortage, so maybe that's good. There were 3 secondaries. The FUTU, which we've been focusing on, came at 130, and the ZLab came at 150, and there's a few others yet to be priced, okay? There's one by some underwriter or stock I never heard of, so let's not talk about that. And there are 8 IPOs slated for the next 2 days. Okay, so that's the IPO area. Let's look at what Kathy did overnight. You know what? I'm a little confused because when I undertook investing and trading 101, I was told never to buy from the new low list. Okay, and it seems as though her buy list consists of stocks on the new low list. And so she sold Nevada, Square, Roku. That I get, taking profits and some big winners. That makes sense to me. But she keeps buying like this open table or open door, whatever the hell the name of it is, OPEN. I mean, look at this chart. This thing is a piece of crap. I mean, I would want to see a base. She's been buying it from 35 on down. Okay. And I mean, she's the queen, and to throw stones at the queen doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I'm confused by her continually buying. I guess she's, listen, conviction is great as long as it works out for you. So from the new low, she's been buying this open door, hand over fist. She bought another £1 million Palantir. Yeah, she looks 10 years out, Rob. But, I'd want to see some basing or something. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And listen, who am I to argue with her, right? I mean, she's been nothing but net for a while now. So I'm just stating an observation. Okay, workhorse, SPFR, the 3Ds. She's sticking with her conviction names. Good luck. When I see them base, I'll. Yeah, but Rob, we don't look. You make a good point. I know you're messing with me, but you make an interesting point. She looks 10 years out and she doesn't give a damn, and she's happy they're cheaper, I guess. But she sticks in there and she keeps buying the same names day in and day out. Okay, workhorse. Could a stock look any worse than workhorse? Look at this piece of crap. $45 to $12, and she's been buying it all the way down. So whatever. Good luck. She's been great, so I don't blame people for having money with her. So that's what she's up to. Okay, let's take how much time do I have? I have 2 minutes. So I have 2 market prognosticators talking, and I'll do one today and one tomorrow. So let's talk about what Dan Niles is saying. Okay, he's been really right. And what he's saying basically is he sees a correction coming. He thinks that the market has been driven basically by the stimulus, which we all know. His favorite 2 groups are financials and energy. He is least positive on high PE tech because he thinks interest rates are going higher, which makes sense. And he thinks because of the GDP growth, which is going to be the best in decades, he's bullish on Facebook and Google, okay, to differentiate from high PE tech, which would be like the Optas, the Nows, the Twillos. Okay, he likes those 2 because he thinks ad growth is going to be through the roof with the GDP growth. Okay, so that's what he said. I'll talk about Rick Reeder tomorrow, who I think is like lights out great. Like he's like a Tepper-esque kind of guy. And we'll talk about what he's looking for going forward. I like seeing what these really smart guys are doing, because they really, and especially when they've been right. Okay, so we'll look at that tomorrow, and I'm out of time, guys. I apologize for coming on a minute late, and let's make some money today, and thanks for your time. Sorry about that, Spartan.
Yeah, no worries at all. Alrighty, guys, what's going on? Morning. I'm going to quickly just rip through the pre-market notes that we created, the pre-market action plan there. You can see it. You can pause it, watch, or read through it. Right there, there's all the charts. And then on the option side, same thing. All right, let's take a look at these names from a let's take a look at these names first, what they are, and then we'll go through them from a technical standpoint. ISRG, Netflix, Roku, AMAT, Fucho, and Riot on the pre-market action plan this morning. ISRG earnings beat EPS and revs year-over-year growth 17.5%. Stocks gapping up. Netflix earnings beat EPS and revs year-over-year growth 24.2%. Q2 guidance for EPS raised, rev lowered. Large miss on subscriber numbers. Stocks gapping down on that. Roku trading lower in sympathy with Netflix. AMAT ICAP increases applied materials AMAT price target to 160. Stocks gapping up slightly on that. Future gapping down in continuation from last day's move. Riot blockchain shares are trading lower amid a decline in the price of Bitcoin. Let's take a look at these names from a technical standpoint. Intraday. First two we're going to be looking at are ISRG and Netflix. So ISRG, Netflix, let's take a look here. ISRG 839.79 pivot to the upside today. Levels able to be held. Room towards 850.06 to 858.46. Unable to hold. Look for pullback towards 825.35 to 812.50 on the downside. Overall on ISRG, going to be leaning on the bullish neutral side if that pivot's able to hold. Be looking for a continuation push higher. Let's take a look at Netflix here. So Netflix pivot to the downside today, 499.12, unable to hold towards 493.05 to 486.88. Able to hold, look for pushback to 507.51 to 515.78 on the upside. Overall on Netflix, going to be leaning on the bearish neutral side today. If that pivot breaks, I think we can get a little bit of a pull, and then I'll be looking for that basing to kick in. If it does, sell off a little bit. Let's take a look at the next two, which are, what were they? Next two, Roku AMAT. Okay, Roku guys, pivot to the downside today is going to be the 239.60 level. Levels unable to hold towards 331.93 to 324.16. Able to hold 348.33 will be tested. 352.93 on the upside. Overall, going to be leaning bearish if the pivot breaks. If it's able to hold, then obviously we can get a little bit of a bounce this morning. So keep an eye on that. AMAT pivot 129.31. Levels able to hold. We got room towards 131.30. Back to the 132.69. Unable to hold 128.15 to the 124.57 level on the downside will be tested. Leaning bearish if that pivot's unable to hold as well. So we'll be watching that level this morning. Futuro and Riot. Futuro pivot 136.58. Level holds. Room back towards 141.71, 146.85. Unable to hold 128.22 to the 117.09 will be tested. Overall in Futuro, looking for a little bit of a pull this morning, and then I do think we can see a blow off to the downside and probably a bounce. Pricing at 130, so you kind of use 130 as your line in the sand, but we'll see what happens with that. I think we can get a little bit of a blow off to the downside. Riot pivot to the downside today, 38.91, unable to hold towards 34.68 to 32.46. Able to hold, look for pushback to 41.88 to 43.75 on the upside. Going to be leaning on the bearish side today if the pivot's unable to be reclaimed. If it is, I do think we can get a decent bounce on Riot. Why? Because you will be getting a downtrend break on the hourly. So watch the pivot point today. Big important level on that name. Let's take a look at the SPY and the FANG. And as always, I'm going to type up the SPY. SPY 411.69. Whoops, did not mean to do that. SPY 411.69 is the pivot to the downside today. This level is unable to hold. Room lower into the 410.13 support. Breaks, we see the 409. Excuse me. 22 tested. Pivot holds. Room higher into the 412.63 resistance. Breaks, we see the 413.53 level tested. So I'm leaning bearish, guys, looking for pull lower towards, I want to see 309.83, 309.86 level tested, which is the EMA support on the daily. And then I think once we hit that level, we can get a bounce off of it. And that's going to be pretty much near where the bottom of the channel is as well. Bounce off the bottom of the channel back to the upside. I think that can occur. We'll see what happens though. So that's going to be the SPY today. Let's take a look at Apple. The rest of the FANG. Apple pivot to the downside is going to be that 132.67 level, unable to hold towards 130.96 to 129.70. Able to hold, look for a pushback to 134.47 to 135.82 on the upside. Going to be leaning on the bearish neutral side of Apple for now in the short term. Let's take a look at Amazon. Pivot to the downside, 33.10.61 levels able to hold. We got room towards 33.41.04 to 33.62. Unable to hold 32.89 to the 32.08.39 will be tested on the downside. Did I? 32.50, sorry. 12 will be tested on the downside. Overall on Amazon leaning bullish. I want to see a hold of the pivot and a little bit of a bounce on that name today. We've done Netflix, Facebook. Let's take a look at this. Pivot is the 299.81 spot. Unable to hold 297.22 will be tested. Able to hold, look for a pushback towards the 303.60 to 307.18 on the upside. Actually going to be leaning on the bullish neutral side of Facebook today, looking for a bounce higher. Looking for a hold with pivot, continuation to the upside. Google pivot to the downside today is going to be that 22.72 level. Unable to hold 22.63 to 22.48 will be tested. Able to hold 22.80 to 22.95 on the upside. Overall on Google, going to be leaning on the bearish side today, looking for continuation lower to the bottom end of the gap. Let's take a look at the QQQs and IWM. So QQQ, 33.92 pivot, unable to hold. We got room towards 331.44. Able to hold, look for a pushback to 335.45 on the upside. Overall on the Qs, going to be leaning on the bearish side today, looking for a continuation pull to the downside if that pivot's unable to hold. I do think we'll test the pivot this morning. So a little bit of downside, and then we can see what happens there. And lastly, IWM, pivot 217.49, unable to hold. Room towards 214.85 to 213.06. Able to hold, look for a pushback to 219.36 to 220.98 on the downside. Still leaning bearish unless we can reclaim that pivot this morning. So that's the SPY, that's the FANG. Those are the individual names that we're looking at today, guys. If you do have any questions, you can go to Spartan